Yes. Hi, Emily. How are you doing? Nice to meet you in person. Thank you for joining. I'm happy to have it, and I'm happy that we were able to work it out. We had more people that registered.
Kids4Peace? No, it's not. People want, especially as things are,
No, I know. No, we'll chat
we can post it. Definitely, many kids would like to learn or
Suma?
practice the before.
Is that okay if we'll, yeah.
Should we starting?
Yeah. Okay. Can everybody hear me well? Yes? So, good evening and welcome. My name is Kobi Cohen. I'm the Israel educator at Bnei Jeshurun, and I'm really excited to host our first non-spiritual in-person event in a while. This event is being live streamed on our YouTube channel, and I would also like to thank our partners at Amenu and Kids4Peace for partnering up with us on this event. Located in East Jerusalem, the neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah is known not for its unique architecture and rich history, but for the ongoing clashes between the Palestinians and Jewish settlers. This past May, what happened in Sheikh Jarrah was the spark that led to the last round of violence. Yet, in the face of rising hate and fear, a few visionaries formed Kids4Peace, an organization that connects youth from different religions and backgrounds and empowers them to be agents of change. Through their award-winning dialogue, leadership, and social action programs, youth gain the skills of confidence to bridge divides, promote understanding, and seek justice in their schools and communities. Suma Qawasmi, the community manager at Kids4Peace, and Ittay Flescher, the education director, are here to share their stories about the challenges, fears, and dreams they encounter through their work together at Kids4Peace, an interfaith movement that brings together youth from East and West Jerusalem. So, welcome, Suma and Ittay, to Bnei Jeshurun, and we're really excited to have you here. And I would like you to start by telling us a little more about yourself. Suma, would you like to start?
Yes. Hi, and thank you all for coming today, as it's your first time being here after the COVID, or still COVID, we're still having COVID, but during COVID, let's say. So thank you so much for this introduction. As you said, my name is Suma. I am a Palestinian Muslim. I live in East Jerusalem. I joined Kids4Peace in 2017. As an advisor, and now I'm the community manager there, working there. I live in Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood. I joined the peace building field when I was 13 years old. I grew up in a house with my parents, and we're 5 ladies. We don't have brothers. So for our culture and background, it's kind of hard not to have a male in the house, only my dad. But lucky me, I have a very, I don't know how to describe my dad, but my dad supported us a lot, and he really wanted us to grow and to build our own personalities, to be independent and responsible ladies. So when I was 13 years old, he just suggested that, asked me, do you want to go to the state? And for a 13 years old lady, a girl, I was very excited. I'm going to the state alone for 21 days without my parents, so definitely I said yes. And the trip was with Kids4Peace organization as a camper. I knew I'm going with Kids4Peace, but I didn't know exactly what I'm going to do there. And it was my first time there interacting with Israelis. Usually for East Jerusalemites, the only interaction that we have with Israelis are as soldiers on the checkpoint, in a hospital, at the mall, very basic things. So it was my first time sitting there, sharing, discussing, negotiating. We cried. It was really hard, honestly, for a 13 years old girl. And after coming back, I came back by the beginning of August. By the beginning of September, a month exactly after coming back, we woke up one day at 6 a.m. Back then, I didn't know what's going on in Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood. And that day, when I woke up, I found that the area was a military area. It was closed for 3 days. They bombed my neighbor's house, and they took the house. So for me, a month ago, I was sitting with Israelis. We discussed many things. We spoke about history. They apologized. We cried together. I came back to my parents. Oh, no, I did it. They recognize us. They know what's going on. And a month after it, I'm living a different reality. It was really hard, honestly, because I had to take a decision. It's either I'll continue what I started a month ago, or I'll just take a step back and say, hey, I'm living a different reality. There's something wrong. It took me a while, honestly, to decide either I'll continue or no, and it's clear that I decided to continue after this. I went back to the camp also in 2010 as a PS, peer support, and I went back to the camp as a counselor. So every time I went back, I've learned something new. And here I am now after 15 years. I'm counting it. Let's say every day I'm learning something new, and that's why I'm working with Kids4Peace now, because I believe that the kids, they have the right to learn and to decide what do they want. We'll speak now after Ittay presenting himself. We'll speak a little, or not a little bit, we'll speak a lot about Kids4Peace and what we're doing in Kids4Peace. That's it.
Thank you. And thank you also, Kobi, for the invitation. So, Erev Tov, Masal Khair, good evening. My name is Ittay Flescher. I'm the Education Director at Kids4Peace. So, my story is that I was born in Ramat Gan, which is near Tel Aviv. My mother was born in Baghdad, in Iraq, and my father he was one of the first children actually born in Israel, but his parents are from Germany. My grandmother came to Palestine on the 5th Aliyah and worked on a kibbutz, and I was meant to live my whole life growing up in Israel, but then as a child my father got a job in Australia, and so I moved to Melbourne, and that's where I grew up and had a Jewish education in a day school, and also worked in a range of jobs, and then eventually I became a teacher at a number of high schools, from a Haredi high school all the way to a Reform and everything in between, and I taught a mixture of Jewish history, Tanakh, Shoah, obviously courses about the conflict as well, comparative religions, that sort of thing. And then in 2018, I had a Shnat Shabbaton, like a sabbatical year, and I decided that with my wife it would be fun to move to Jerusalem to try something different from Melbourne and just give our kids an experience where they would learn Hebrew. And then I was looking for work in education, because I very much believe in education a lot more than politics, I guess, to change lives. And I thought for a little bit to be an English teacher, but I didn't do it, and I'm very happy I wasn't an English teacher. And so I found Kids4Peace, and I've been working now with Suma there for 3.5 years. And for me, working at Kids4Peace is, in a way, how I justify living in Jerusalem. I think it would be, for me, very hard to live in a city that's so divided and that has a lot of what I would consider injustice without being involved in something that makes a difference to the people that live there. And also, even for my own children, my daughter Nava has started going to Kids4Peace as well, and I think it's so important that when you live in a city where you have separate schools, separate bus systems, separate language, separate neighborhoods, it's one of the least integrated cities on earth. You know, it's, you know, we call it United Jerusalem, but it's like there's nothing, it's not mixed in the sense that, yes, on the light rail or on the buses you'll have Jews and Arabs sitting together, but it's not mixed in the way that New York is, or Paris or London, or other cities, it's very divided. There's different status, there's different citizenships, all of these sorts of things, and that's why Kids for Peace is so important. And that's why, for me, being part of Kids for Peace is a real privilege, and also I feel like something essential to do.
Thank you very much for the presentation. And actually, Ittay, you described it well. Both of you live in theory the same city, but it's a completely different world. So what do you do in Kids for Peace, in order to build those bridges between the worlds?
I'll speak a little bit about Kids for Peace, and Ittay will continue about the educational side. Kids for Peace is an interfaith organization. We bring kids to one room. We deal with them as Muslims, Christians, and Jews. We don't work depending on their nationalities. I don't divide them saying I have a Palestinian group and an Israeli group. We bring them to one room, not to ask them to define peace or like to discuss politics or history or what's going on, who's right or who's wrong. We're just bring them, first of all, we work with kids from 6th grade, so they are young. And those kids, they continue with us. So we can't bring them in one room when they are 6th grade and put them and like ask them to have dialogues and speak who's right, who's wrong. We bring them to one room to represent themselves, to learn about each other. We're sharing the city. I'm lucky I'm a Muslim. I went to a Christian school, so I know a lot about Christianity. I know a lot about Judaism, but I know it from my dad, not from our educational system. So we're sharing the city at the end. We're living together at the end, but we don't know anything. Yes, we're like, even our office is like 5 minutes walking from West Jerusalem, but at the same time, people, they are not interacting. They know nothing about each other. So we bring the kids, we start working with them in very simple things, discussing very, very simple issues. Speak about yourself. Where do you live? Speak about your religion. To which school do you go? What do you know about Christianity? What do you do in your holidays? And that's as simple as it is. And then they grow with us. They go to 7th grade, 8th grade, and each year we have different program. And at the end, they continue with us as counselors. The counselors now, that's a different issue. Because of COVID and because of the US aid cut, we asked our kids, they are now in 10th grade, to help us lead the programs for the younger kids. Before, we used to hire specific interpreters or translators. And definitely why we say translators and interpreters, because the kids in 6th grade, they might not understand other languages. For a Jewish kid, maybe he didn't ever heard someone speaking Arabic in front of him. So we hire people to translate everything in a room. So to make the kids feel comfortable and to let them speak freely, we give them this opportunity, speak in your language, and we're here to translate it. Don't worry. You don't have to speak English. We don't pick our kids depending on their, let's say, if they have a very high score in English. No, we just want kids to come and to learn. They have the will. They really want to understand what's going on in the city. So that's like very fast introduction. I can give you more details about the education. What do we do exactly with them?
Thank you. So just before I tell you more details about the education program, I know we're a small group here. Just want to ask each person to introduce themselves. And as you introduce yourself, just say your name and one thing that you know about Jerusalem. Just something that you've heard, or maybe you've seen, something that when you think of Jerusalem, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Yeah.
Flescher, and been to Jerusalem a couple times, and history there is what strikes me about it.
Okay, so Bob is saying the thing he knows about Jerusalem is history. Thank you.
I'm Carrie, and I just think of Jerusalem as being so intense, both religiously and politically.
Yeah, intense religiously and politically. Thank you, Jerry. Mm-hmm. Yes. Right. It's almost like they consider East Jerusalem a different country to West Jerusalem by saying that. Thank you, Alex. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So Daniel's talking about the fact that there's not just a geographic, but there's also a cultural divide that you can't always see. But if you live there, you notice it very clearly. Thank you, Daniel.
I'm thinking about how much the city means to so many people who live there, people around Israel and Palestine, people around the world, and how much intensity that brings.
Thank you, Emily. Yeah.
Jenny, it's a place with very strong emotions and very strong feelings.
Yeah, definitely. I think everyone in Jerusalem has a very strong opinion, and I think that's what keeps people living there. A lot of people that live in Jerusalem are struggling for something. The secular are struggling against the Haredim are struggling against the secular, the Palestinians against the Israelis, etc. There's a struggle for it to be a home. There's a struggle to show that it belongs to you. There's a struggle to show that you belong to it. There's a struggle to show your history to it. There's a struggle for what the city will be, demographically, culturally, politically, whose capital will it be. It's also the place where all the national things are, the National Library, the national monuments, the Parliament. You know, there's no ordinary Jerusalem. There's the National Library. You know, like I guess like Washington D.C. And so yeah, everything is a lot more contested in that city. And for me, that makes it an amazing place to live. And a lot of the times, our kids who come to Kids4Peace, they're 12. You know, they don't know this. Like for them, the whole world is Jerusalem, and whatever Jerusalem is, it's normal because they haven't lived somewhere else. And so we often start one of our first programs in 6th grade with a giant map. And it's a huge map of Jerusalem. We ask each kid to place a pin where they live. And we ask the Jewish kids to place a blue pin and the Palestinian kids to place a red pin. And every time they do it, they notice something. They notice that all the blue pins are in West Jerusalem and all the red pins are in East Jerusalem. They don't know what East and West Jerusalem is because the map doesn't teach them that. And so then we ask the kids, why are all the blue pins on this side and the red pins on that side? And they don't know initially, because they don't know about 1967 and the borders and that sort of thing. They just think that's normal. And then we start from that. A lot of questions come up about why aren't there any blue and red pins in the same neighborhood? Like, why are we all separate and mixed up and all of that sort of thing? And then from there starts questions about religion and about culture and faith and identity and schools and education and all of those things. And what we're trying to do in our education program is not make anyone change their opinion or anyone sort of stop believing or loving their nation, chas v'shalom, or anything like that. What we want is to provide activities that will cause the kids to ask questions of themselves and, more importantly, of each other. And so everything is done really as a game, with triggers, with pictures, with movies, with cards, with all sorts of educational devices that we use, so that they come and they think and they learn, and they do it in a way that they're having fun. The fun is also very, very important as well, because if they're not having fun, kids don't come back. So it's a matter of teaching, I guess, both the head and the heart at the same time about the city where they live, and also about the other part of the city where they live that they know nothing about.
So, thank you for sharing this. I want to ask you, how do you enroll the kids? I mean, Jerusalem is a big city. You have different cultures, different religions, and so you need to bring a variety of kids from different backgrounds. Where do you find those kids?
First of all, I'll speak about the division of the group. So every year we recruit for 6th grade, let's say, for example, we recruit 30 kids. And the division of the group, it depends on the population of Jerusalem. So the minority in Jerusalem, they are the Christians. So from we can't divide them a third Muslim, third Jews, third Christians, but we can tell out of the 30, let's say we choose 12 Muslims, 12 Jews, and 6 Christians. How do we find them? Honestly, we're a very big community. We have a good number of communities, so people, they tell each other, brothers and sisters. It's a word of mouth. We post it on Facebook, but there's no, let's say, specific way that we recruit, depending on it. We can't say, we're only taking kids from, let's say, this community or that community. Anyone wants to join Kids4Peace, we have no problem with that.
I'll say a few things because I mainly recruit the Jewish kids, being an Israeli. So I go into schools as well, and I have a sort of a 5-minute presentation that I give in classrooms. And it's always interesting when I speak to a school. There's kind of 3 levels of, I guess, screening I go through. The first is with the principal. Will the principal invite me to speak or not? Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they give reasons that are true. Sometimes they say you can't come in because of COVID. I don't know, other people come in, so what is it? Sometimes they don't feel comfortable with us, to be honest. They don't necessarily want someone promoting a youth movement where kids are meeting with Arab Palestinians from East Jerusalem. They might feel that some parents are uncomfortable with that. Then when I speak to the kids, some kids are interested but are busy. A lot of West Jerusalem kids have a lot of programs after school that you see. It's far less common in East Jerusalem to have programs after school. I think West Jerusalem has a lot more what's called chugim. So that could be basketball, football, a musical instrument, other youth movements as well, Sayarut, Bnei Akiva, Shomer HaTzair, Noar Oved, all of those movements. And so there's a lot more competition, I guess, for the Jewish kids. And then those that actually want to come, before they come, we do an interview with every child and their parents. The interview is very important because we want to make sure that not just the child but the parent needs to know what they're signing up for, because what we do is very sensitive. We don't want kids to be there whose parents are not supportive of our work, because that can cause us a lot of problems and cause the kids problems as well. So we always do the interview with the child and the parent together. They come together and we talk to them about what our values are, what they'll see in the programs, how we expect them to behave, the fact that we want them to continue coming more than once, so that they're welcome. How are you? And so we want them to. We want to make a safe environment. I think that's most important for us, and that's why the interview is an essential part of the recruitment. And sometimes after the interview, they're more excited about Kids4Peace than just when they, filled in a form, and then they bring a friend from their school or something like that because they've seen us. But we're not a movement, I guess. Maybe in Beit Safafa we're well known, but like in most of Jerusalem, a lot of people haven't heard of us. And so when I come into a school, I'm often the first person that's ever come in from Kids4Peace, and so I have to explain, what is it, why are we doing this, all of these sorts of things, and it's a challenge, but Todah La'el, we have Jewish kids, and I think it's really important that they're there, and every meeting I can see these moments of like just a penny dropping a little bit more. I remember 2 meetings ago, one of the Palestinian children said he wasn't a citizen of Israel, and they were like, what? Like they didn't know that half the room wasn't a citizen of because they just thought And I understand why they think that everyone that lives in my city is a citizen of the same country and has a passport, and they just didn't know that, and that's what happens from personal stories, that things that we as maybe adults take for granted, for the kids, they can see and hear this, not from us as their sort of educators, but from each other.
Yeah, I would just like to elaborate on that point. The Palestinians of East Jerusalem have no citizenship. Some of them used to be Jordanian. They used to have a Jordanian citizenship that was banned after '67, and the State of Israel never gave them citizenship. They're all registered
As
residents of the State of Israel, but without a passport. It's a very unique situation in the world. And Suma can actually elaborate on that.
As a Jerusalemite, I can tell you, we have a travel document, not a passport, that allows us to travel through Ben Gurion Airport. But when you see it when you see the nationality side, for many Jerusalemites, it's empty. They don't have nationality. It's empty, and the first page, as all the passports, it's like the name and the basic information. And on the other page, you'll see a visa printed to enter Israel's multi-entries because you're a resident, not a citizen. I just want to elaborate about one thing that Ittay said, the interview. I felt I should make it clear that we don't reject kids. Since I started, I don't remember that we rejected any kid. No. We give the opportunity to all the kids. We can't judge a 6th grade kids. And he's or she 12 years old. We can't judge them and just reject them. Sometimes parents, after hearing us speaking, they don't let their kids come. It depends, but from us, we've never rejected anyone.
Yeah, I'll say, the interview it's more them interviewing us than us interviewing them, because we want them to make sure they know what they're signing up for. I remember once, I've never rejected a kid, but I did once do an interview with a more religious Jewish family, and the father said, "Is there girls and boys together at kids?" And we said, "Yes, we treat all the kids, all the genders together." And he said, what happens if my daughter wants to marry a Palestinian boy from coming to kids? And I said, that's not going to happen. And he's like, but is it possible? And I was like, look, it's theoretically possible. It's very, very unlikely. And he's like, but it's possible, so that's a risk. And he was really worried about it. And anyone that would come to Kids4Peace would know that we're not at all trying to get kids to marry each other, and they never would. They don't even speak the same language. I don't know many people that marry people that don't speak the same language, let alone all the cultural and political barriers. But that's why we do that interview, because it's important for us that if that girl is going to come to Kids4Peace, her parents have to be on board. If they clearly weren't ready for it, so set up, and that's part of that process. Yeah.
So I want to ask you, how do you tackle, the kids come from those different backgrounds.
Yeah.
And Jerusalem is a very, I would say, explosive political issue. How do you disarm all of these conflicts, when you're putting all of these kids in the same room and you need them to have a common grounds? How do you tackle the political issue with the kids?
So we're not a political organization, firstly. We don't have any stance on the two-state solution, the one-state solution, BDS, Netanyahu, Bennett. We don't make political statements. We don't go to demonstrations. Even we don't define peace as well. I think that's important to know. It's in the name of the organization, Kids4Peace, but every child there, for them, peace means something very different. And I think that's really healthy, because if we all had the same definition of peace, or you had to sign up to, I don't know, let's say the two-state solution or Oslo or whatever so-called peace definitions there are, that excludes a lot of people straight away, because by nature we all have many different opinions. And so people are coming as they are because they want to realize, for them, whatever their vision of peace. For some, it might be they want to be equal. For them, peace is every person has the same civil rights. For some, peace, yes, does mean changing the names on the map and the names of places. For some, it would mean changing policing. So in Jerusalem, pretty much all the police are Jews or Druze, but you don't have Palestinian police policing Palestinians, and so that obviously shapes the way people relate to police in a very significant way. It could be to do with housing, so the way land is allocated in Jerusalem to build houses, it's not equal. It's much easier, and there's a lot more building happening in West Jerusalem than East Jerusalem. And so for a lot of Palestinians, it's very difficult to, I mean, maybe you want to add to that, but it's very difficult to build a home not just in Sheikh Jarrah, but in Beit Hanina, in Beit Safafa, in so many neighborhoods. It's almost impossible to a young family wants to leave their house and to build, and they can't. And so when we bring the kids together, we don't start with let's talk about housing, because that's not what you talk about with a 6th grade. We start by telling them, firstly, come as you are, come with your own idea of what peace is, and we also make it a lot of fun, a lot of games, a lot of sitting in a circle. Food is amazing, like food just bonds like nothing else does, so there's always food at the meetings. For the festivals, we have an iftar meal for Ramadan. We bring sufganiyot for Hanukkah, Christmas cookies for Christmas, chocolate eggs for Easter. So there's a festival every 5 minutes in Jerusalem, once you factor in all of the religions, and even there's 2 Christmases, because you've got the Catholic and the Orthodox and the Protestant denominations as well. So the festivals is a big way to do it, and also I would say we also have a very high ratio of staff to kids. So in a room of say 20 children, there'll be 6 educators. So one adult educator that we call a grade leader, and then 5 or 6 madrichim or murshidin in Arabic, who are 16-year-old educators, so that when they're in small groups of 3, it's like a 1-to-3 ratio, so that every child can speak in Hebrew or in Arabic or in English and be translated. And so it's not like 1 to 20 where the kids can sort of control the room. It's very much the educators are controlling the room to keep everyone safe, to make sure. We have some kids that only speak Arabic and no other language. We have kids that only speak Hebrew and no other language. So it's really important that we have educators that can translate and make all those kids feel safe, and also just culturally translate, because sometimes when you translate, it's not just the words. Like a joke, if you translate a joke, it's not funny. You have to explain the meaning of the joke or the meaning of the context of the words that you're saying, and that's why you need madrichim or murshidin who live and grew up in Jerusalem, who went through Kids4Peace, that can do that.
I'll add something. As Ittay said, we don't speak about politics. We don't put the kids in a room and speak about politics. But sometimes we can't just keep acting that there's no elephant in the room. We have to address the elephant in the room. So for example, the last spring, we couldn't work for a couple of months. The situation in Jerusalem affected us personally, and we stopped for 2.5 months, I believe. During this period of time, we didn't meet the kids. We, not personally or on Zoom, we didn't, but at the same time, we didn't leave them. We used to message them personal messages, check on them. After coming back, we felt that it's their right to sit and to speak about it, but definitely on different levels. For example, the murshidin, the Ittay spoke about them, the madrichim, we put them in a circle and we spoke about it. We had to speak about it. We can't just act that as if nothing is happening. If we want to keep working on the right way, as I said, we can't keep acting that there's no elephant in the room. So we asked them to come to express themselves. How do you feel about it? What do you feel back then? We had to speak with the parents first, especially for the young kids. We had special Zoom meetings to discuss, to ask them, how did it affect your kid? What do you think about it? How do you feel? So it's different from a level to another. But yeah, at some point, honestly, it was the first time, last spring, it was our first time really addressing, discussing it 100% clearly. We're discussing politics now. It was for the first meeting, I believe, or it depends on the group, but to make sure, we didn't want them to feel, we're bringing them to a room and just lying and, no, we're here to do something real.
Yeah, I'd also say that May this year was very difficult because I'm sure you all know what happened in Gaza with Hamas and the rockets and the devastation there. And in addition to that, almost every mixed city, Lod, Ramle, Jerusalem, Haifa, there were clashes almost every night between police and between civilians as well. And a lot of these kids, were telling us, my parents are not letting me leave the home when it gets dark. I'm staying. Kids that would be generally quite independent and free and take buses. I don't know if anyone's raised a child in Jerusalem before, but it's not a place where parents are restrictive. It's not like the US, where you take kids in cars everywhere. Everyone just goes on their own everywhere all the time from Kita Aleph, from a very young age.
On June was supposed to be our staff retreat.
Yeah.
And we booked everything. We were supposed to go to Haifa. For us, Haifa is the perfect city. It's calm, people are working, nice weather, and we're going to Haifa. And even my mom, she's like, Suma, are you crazy? You're going to Haifa. Everything is it's not the same. So we had to cancel many things.
And generally, people in Haifa think Jerusalem is the dangerous place, and now we're worried about going to Haifa because it's a mixed city in May for a staff retreat, to plan the future programs. And so, so I think for me, the civil war aspect of May was really heartbreaking. And also we're part of a larger network called AllMep, which is the Alliance for Middle East Peace. There are 125 NGOs in AllMep that work on various shared society, civil society, Jewish Arab projects, and most of them are for adults. There's religious organizations, there's the Parent Circle, Combatants for Peace, the Hand in Hand School, all of those sorts of organizations. And I remember being on a Zoom call with the education directors of all the AllMep grantees, and this sense of, we've been working for 20 or 30 years now on building sort of grassroots solidarity, and then in May it just all explodes in your face, and it's just what do we do? How did this, we were saying our work is meant to prevent this. It's meant to prevent this kind of sort of violence between civilians, and now it's happening everywhere in places where we thought it would never happen. And so it definitely was a crisis, and I think a lot of organizations had to regroup and think of what are we doing, how are we doing. And for me, at least, a lesson that I took from it is it's not that we did our job badly, it's that we only ever reached 1% of the population. Imagine that instead of all these NGOs touch 1-2% of the population, imagine we reached 20, 30, 40% of the population, because it's very hard to wake up in the morning and go and burn a synagogue, or go and find a random Arab on the street and literally beat him to death if you're friends with Arabs and Jews and you've been to synagogues and mosques and you know how important those holy places are. You don't behave in that way. But when you are in your bubble and you're incited by social media and certain politicians and those sorts of things, then you can do that violence. And I think after the violence in May, I think there was a big pushback by what I would call the moderate majority that said, this is not how we want to leave. I saw many people changing their Facebook profiles in Hebrew and Arabic, Yehudim ve'Aravim mesarvim liot ovim, Jews and Arabs don't want to be enemies, and I think to bring those voices back to the table, and I would say that for us, our first meeting after May was hard. Like, first we met with staff, and then we've met with kids, and it was very emotional. It was very, because, you know, in addition to being staff, we all have families. I have children as well that lived in Jerusalem, that lived through that, and our other younger staff as well. Each had their own experiences at the Hebrew University campus. Obviously, Suma in Sheikh Jarrah, which she'll add on to in a moment. And it was a really difficult month for us, just personally as residents of Jerusalem, and then as human beings as well. And I think sharing your pain is just as important as working towards peace. And in fact, maybe that's essential as well, because you can't build trust without being honest about your pain and your vulnerabilities, and why your work is difficult. And also, you know, both Suma and I, but Suma probably even a lot more than me, we both have mornings where we wake up and saying, why do I do this? You know, why do I work in this? This is never going to make a difference. And I think that's normal, and I think that's why a lot of peace organizations have a lot of burnout, because it is hard to have hope when you see a reality that is far from hopeful, and you overcome that together. And I think I've become very good friends with Suma and Ram and all of our team in Kids4Peace. And if we didn't have those personal relationships between us, I don't know if it's work that we could do.
So you actually, both of you shared some of your experiences from last May. And I would like to ask you to tell us a little more about how you literally worked with the kids, you know, to express themselves in such a tense situation.
You're the educational director.
So, look, when we first came back, the first thing we did was we put the kids in a circle, and then we said to them, we didn't ask them like who was right and wrong, you know. And I remember when I first started Kids4Peace, I used to ask the kids who was right and wrong. Was, what do you think of Hamas, and what do you think of Netanyahu? And it was a disaster, because then it just becomes like the standard political conversation. You've probably seen it around your Shabbat tables or on Facebook or whatever like that, and it's not productive, and people cry and they leave. And so instead of asking people to share their political view on what happened and who is to blame, I asked everyone just to share how they felt during the last month. And it was a very open question, and Ram and I shared as well. She's my co-education director. And it was more, you know, some kids said it didn't affect me so much. Some kids said it didn't affect me, but affected my father and mother. Some kids say it didn't affect me, but affected my school because my school was closed or changed or something like that. A lot of kids spoke about social media, especially on Instagram. Like there was a war on the streets, but there's also a war on Instagram and TikTok. I don't know how many here use those apps, but you know, as a child, you can spend 3-4 hours a day scrolling Instagram, TikTok. You can see some very graphic things, and that's really hard to see. And you can see your friends saying things that you might find really confronting. So a lot of the processing was not just processing what happened to them in Jerusalem, was also processing what they'd seen on social media and allowing them to share it, and then that got onto a conversation about real news and fake news, which I'm sure in America you've had that conversation as well. And you know, I believe it's really important to teach kids how to read news, because I think a big reason why we have conflict is news that's incorrect, and news that is biased, or news that doesn't tell the whole story. I remember there was an incident that I remember it very clearly on seeing the same video on 2 social media sites where there was a Jewish man who was run over by a car, and all of the Israeli media were saying, you know, Arab kills a Jewish man. No, I think it was the other way around. Sorry, it was an Arab driver, killing a Jewish man, and then the other half of the video was
that he was attacked, right?
Yes, was that he was attacked.
Attacked by a mob.
It was a Jewish driver running over an Arab man, and there was Arabs throwing stones at his car, and that's why he did it. But then, before you saw the video of the Arabs throwing stones at his car, there was police shooting tear gas at the Arabs, which is what led them to throw the rocks. Anyway, so if you only saw 20 seconds of the video, you only got sort of like one side or one individual being aggressive or violent. But if you actually pieced like the 3 20-second clips that I saw on 3 different of the same incident that clearly everyone had labeled and identified, you get the whole story. But when you just want to see the 20 seconds that makes your side look like a victim and then the other side look, you know, violent and like they want to kill you, then you get very angry and you get very upset, and understandably so. And so that importance of sort of not relying on just one source for information, of reading multiple sources, I think is really important for kids to understand and to read media critically. Like, I almost think like, as schools, you know, we teach kids how to read and write and do mathematics and that. Like, I feel like teaching them how to read news is like even more important than reading and writing, you know, like, because it's such an important skill in our lives. And even now, like with COVID, like think of how much misinformation there is online about COVID, and I think that ability to understand how to look at a photo, what a peer review means, what does it mean to check sources, what does it mean to look at videos from multiple angles, to understand editing, you know, all of these sorts of things are so important for us to do and for the kids to have, and it's essential for peace as well. I think a big reason why there isn't peace is because the dominant narratives that you get from your social media about the other person is incredibly negative, and also once you've liked something that is of a certain style, the way the algorithms work is you get more of that. So if you know, there was examples of people liking sort of one thing that's like pretty moderate, but within 10 likes you start getting some pretty extreme content on your social media feed, because that's how those algorithms work. And I know there's been a lot of investigations about Facebook about why they use that model, but it keeps you on the app longer, so that, you know, that's why they do it. But for me, unpacking that with the kids, and I don't say this, I let them say it, is really important for them to understand what's happening to their brain and to their emotions when they're on these apps. And that definitely came up a lot after May. Do you want to add anything to that? No. Yeah.
So at this point, I would like to open the stage for questions from the audience. What I would like to ask you is that if you have the question, please reach out to the mic that is in front of us and ask it using the mic, so our audience who are watching us live can also hear the question.
So many questions.
You can disconnect it from the stand and pass it on.
What are some of the funniest moments that you had because of the culture shock or the cultural differences between your participants?
Talk about the knafe on.
We have, like, every meeting we have a funny moment. Every meeting we have something. The knafe thing, before spring, it was literally before the explosion in Jerusalem. Because of COVID, we had to divide the Iftar Ramadan to different days. And on the last day, I believe, the last time we had the Iftar Ramadan, it was with 6th grade. And the Jewish kid, we were speaking and explaining about Ramadan, and we were telling them that when Ramadan comes, the iftar is on that day. We're going to bring Palestinian food. Usually in Ramadan we eat specific sweet, and we were explaining about it. And then a Jewish kid stood up and she's like, I want knafe. So we were like, all of us, we laughed. We don't eat knafe during Ramadan. Mostly we eat atay, we eat specific sweets. And then a Palestinian girl, she stood up and she's like, my dad, my granddad, and like my dad, they have a sweet shop, and she literally brought like a very big plate of knafe. They enjoyed eating knafe, and her mom called us, and she was very happy. She's like, thank you so much, my daughter, she really liked knafe. And she enjoyed, she felt special, someone brought knafe for her. It was daily, honestly, daily, there's a funny moment between the kids.
I think something that happens at Kids4Peace is that nothing ever goes to plan. Like literally, like even we were coming here tonight and we were meant to meet at a certain time in the lobby, and then as I'm coming downstairs and one of the lifts is broken and I see a technician fixing the lift, and I was like, I bet Suma is in the lift that is broken and we're not going to get here tonight. And that would be like such a typical Kids4Peace thing to happen. And then thankfully she was in the other lift that did get downstairs. But like, I'm so used to, like, we come and then all of a sudden there's a demonstration where 100 people have decided to block a road, or there's a massive traffic jam, or our old office, there used to be, the electricity used to cut out randomly at various hours when you've got all the kids there at night and all of a sudden you have no electricity, or like just things happen all the time that are very unexpected, and I'm like used to it now. Like when things go to plan, like I say to someone, I'm like, how come nothing bad happened? Like why didn't we have some sort of leaking water in the roof? I don't know, like why didn't some weird thing happen to us? So yeah, I'm used to the change. I think the kids come with a really good spirit. Kids are funny as well. Kids make a lot of jokes with one another. I remember once we were on a bus. It was a very short bus trip within Jerusalem, and just all the kids sat at the back of the bus, obviously, and the staff were in the front, and they just all started clapping like songs in Arabic and Hebrew, just like silly songs about, what was it, if you have money you have happiness, or
I don't remember.
Yeah, anyway, but them singing songs and taking selfies and that sort of thing. So yeah, definitely there is, in between the serious moments, there's a lot of fun and humor, and I think that's really important. And then I think also the Murshideen, like we had a seminar just during Hanukkah last month, and all the Murshideen stayed up, I don't know, till 3 in the morning, telling like ghost stories to one another, like scary stories, and it was just like, and then they laughed about that. And so yeah, there's definitely moments where it's often unplanned, but there's a lot to laugh about. Yeah. Sure. Do you want to pass the microphone? Yeah.
So you sort of, the elephant in the room is that Kids4Peace doesn't exist because of problems between Jewish, Muslims, and Christians. Kids4Peace exists because of the Arab-Israeli conflict. And I just find it interesting, like when you're describing the kids, you sometimes label them as like Christian, Jewish, and Muslim, and you sometimes label them as Palestinian and Israeli. So I'm curious, is there a very strong sort of religious focus within the movement?
Between us as a staff, we say Muslims and Palestinians and Israelis. But when we are around the kids, it's always Muslims, Jews, and Christians. We don't mess it up between them, because we will create a different level of, let's say, a conversation if we say Palestinians and Israelis, honestly.
Yeah, I'd also say we're an interfaith organisation, and so in front of the kids it's always Jewish, Muslim and Christian. Even if we're doing a game or something sharing, we say the Jewish kids share this, the Muslim kids share this, you know, that sort of thing. But between us, obviously we know who is Israeli and Palestinian because their neighbourhood and their parents and their language that they speak. Obviously there's a conflict, there's an occupation, there is injustice, there are house demolitions, there's terrorism, there's violence. We're not immune to that, but it's just a place of where do you start with a child who's 12 years old? They're not people that, these kids aren't reading the news, and they're not, you know, in the same sort of political discourse that we might be as adults. And so you've got to use language where they're at. So they might not use the word occupation, but they might say, I feel afraid when I'm in this part of the city, and I feel safe when I'm in this part of the city. And now I know why they feel afraid here and safe there, but for them, using fear and safety is a much more comfortable vocabulary than the words that, let's say, adults might use. One of the programs we do is we bring pictures of like 10 different places in Jerusalem, and we ask kids to say, like, where would you visit and where would you never visit? And it's really interesting for kids to say, but I visit that place all the time and I feel really safe there, but you would never, let's say Damascus Gate is one that's like that, you know, a lot of Jews might not feel safe at the Damascus Gate, whereas for Palestinians the Damascus Gate is like, it's like one of the most central, both religious and cultural places in Jerusalem, or the central bus station, or the first station as well, which are considered more Jewish areas as well. Palestinians often use a different central bus station near the Damascus Gate. Machne Yehuda is a very Jewish market. There's also a Palestinian market, again, near the Damascus Gate, or Salahadin Street as well has a lot of shops that a lot of Jewish kids would never go to Salahadin Street to do their shopping. So just learning about using words that kids can use, and obviously it takes time, and there's no, you know, I'm saying this as a teacher. If you ask me tomorrow to teach mathematics, which I've never actually taught in my life, and I really hate as well, because what's the deal with the X? It really confused me. But like, there's probably like a book that I can download and a website, and it says in order to teach mathematics you do this and then you do that, and then they do this exercise and they follow this ritual, and there's probably an app that teaches them all this stuff. There's no app that says how to run a peace organization. There's no curriculum that I can download from the internet. I can just Google how to run a program for 6th graders who are Israeli and Palestinians during a time of war where they're afraid to leave from the house. That's not online. You have to invent the wheel all the time, and it's not like millions of people are doing this around the world. You know, like, we're the only ones doing this in Jerusalem. And so, you know, often when we're planning, you know, I've got a Google Drive with all my documents from last year, and we're always like stuck for ideas, and the person I work with says, why don't you just like repeat something you did last year? And I was like, because it changed. Like, I live in a different, I can't just use that same program again because the circumstances are different. So as an educator, you have to be very, very creative in how you deal with changing situations. For example, like when Trump wanted to move the embassy to Jerusalem in 2018 and eventually did, like, that meant talking about the US role in the Middle East in a very different way than we had before. Now there's talk about, you know, the Palestinian embassy reopening in Jerusalem. Like, all of these things change the way we have to talk about things, and US administrations, or changes in Israeli politics, in elections, in all of these sorts of things. But again, to use language that kids can understand is really important.
It's not only you have to be ready to invent something new, you have to be ready because they might surprise you with the answer or with the reaction. You don't know what they'll say. Yani, as Ittay said, 2 + 2, it's 4. But their answers, we don't know about it. Sometimes we have to immediately change the program or immediately make a change. Yani, there's nothing guaranteed in what we're doing, honestly.
Another question? Sure.
Just stand in the back.
talking from what you were just explaining, I'm sure COVID was something that made you guys adapt. I want you to maybe talk about that a little bit, but more so, you know, there was certain injustice. There were certain people who were not vaccinated or could not be vaccinated. And if you could maybe talk about if kids have that light bulb moment, I'm not going to call it aha moment, when they do realize injustice, and maybe they won't call it that, but tell us about that.
I'll speak about the COVID part as it's easier. COVID affected us a lot, honestly, as we meet with the kids twice a month in personal meetings, and because of COVID we couldn't. It was really hard to bring all the kids on Zoom when they have everything. Their school is on Zoom, everything is on Zoom, so how come you're going to convince them to come to after, it's not even an after work school, it's after school, it's like to come to Kids4Peace. So Ittay and Ram, the co-educational director, they had to create, let's say, very creative games, meaningful games, to bring them to the meeting. And usually we meet them for 2 hours, 2 hours and a half, and because of COVID, on Zoom, we couldn't make it more than an hour and a half. You can't put a kid in front of a screen for more than an hour and a half. And also, because of COVID, and exactly because of before COVID, the US aid cut happened, and Trump decided to, I don't know what to say, to cut the money. He's not supporting, they are not supporting even peace building organizations anymore. So because of it, and directly we entered COVID, money-wise it was a very big problem. Before the cut and before COVID, we used to hire around 20 people above 18 to interpret and to translate and to lead the activities for the kids and to be around them. Because of it, we couldn't make it. We couldn't hire those people again. So we decided to start working with our kids themselves. They are now in 10th and 11th graders as murshideen and counselors. I'm one of the people, I was 100% against this idea, and how come you want kids to lead kids? From my, let's say, from my side of operational logistical part, I was like, that's going to be really hard. They can't make it, they are kids. Ittay, with his colleague, started working on specific programs to teach those kids how to lead, and to teach those kids what to do exactly with younger kids. And since then, by, let's say, the beginning of COVID, they started this leadership course, and those kids, they started leading the activities. Now we are doing physical programs in Jerusalem, personal programs, and those counselors, murshideen, they are in 10th grade, are leading the activities for the younger kids. And I can tell you, I don't want to say they lead it in a better way than the advisors we used to hire, but they are great, honestly, because those kids themselves, they went through this experience, so they know exactly what to do and how to do it. We're there monitoring and evaluating what they're doing and giving them tips and helping them.
Yeah, I'll say COVID changed us in a number of ways. The first is we used to run all the grades on the same night, and then we'd start with all of the grades together, all the murshideen, all the kids, all the staff. Could be up to 150 people in one room. And we'd sing the Kids4Peace song and do games and jokes and challenges, and it made you feel that instead of being in a group of 20, I'm part of something much larger. And then you would break out into the room based on your grade, and there's something I miss about that, about having all of the grades together and everyone seeing each other in one room, because it does make you feel like you're large. And even after COVID, we haven't gone back to that big group because it's hard with kids and masks, and COVID is very much still with us despite all the vaccinations and everything. Something else that happened was for financial and logistics reasons, Kids4Peace has been around for about 20 years, and during COVID it merged with another organisation called Seeds of Peace. So we now part of Seeds of Peace, which is an international organization that operates in India, in Pakistan, in Egypt, in Jordan, in Palestine, in Israel, and obviously in the United States as well. And it's sort of now, whilst it was sad to, I guess, close as an independent organization, now to be part of a much larger organization connects us to, I guess, change makers all over the world, to a much larger network of peace-building organizations. There's actually now, I can talk to someone in India or Pakistan or Jordan about, like, what's in your program? How do you manage that? So that makes me feel a lot less alone than when I was just doing this sort of on my own. And so I think that's been really good for our organization to have that merge. And in general, I think there's so many NGOs in Jerusalem that have 4 or 5 staff, you know, that run on very small budgets, and a lot of those NGOs were very heavily hit by COVID, because when you're a very small organization, you don't run for a long period of time, or everyone all of a sudden works from home. It's very hard to maintain your momentum and that sort of thing. And I think I'm very much a believer in, like, merging small peace organizations, because I think you can upscale your work. You can also save money by doing that, and you learn to work differently, and that's what we've had to do. In terms of vaccinations and that sort of thing, in the beginning we talked about it a lot, because vaccinations and COVID tests even became a political issue in East and West. Like, there were initially a lot more COVID testing in West Jerusalem than East Jerusalem. There was a lot more vaccinations initially in West Jerusalem than East Jerusalem. Now, thankfully, that's equalized to some extent. There's still some discrepancies that, I don't know if you want to get into that, Suma, but where COVID became a sort of peace type issue, then we talked about it. But now we try to not have debates about COVID, because, like, khalas, they're sick of talking about it, and we talk about other things. Yeah.
Alexander, please.
The aha moments, let me think about it and I'll get back to you. Yeah.
My question
you can adjust, by the way, the mic, so instead of leaning down, you can.
Okay. My question actually ties in with what was just referred to. I was wondering about reaction by official instances. You mentioned cutting off US aid, but how about, like, Israeli and Palestinian authorities? How do they react, and has there been any change maybe over time? And maybe other international players.
I can tell you that neither the Israeli government nor the Palestinian government, they are supporting us. They are not supporting us.
And I would also add that if they wanted to support us, we probably wouldn't accept it. Like, I don't want to have the logo of the Palestinian Authority or the Israeli Ministry of Education on I don't want them to be reviewing my curriculum or telling me.
I'll tell you something.
Yeah.
Both of them.
Yeah.
Both. Before 2013, Kids4Peace didn't take any US aid fund. And it was a very small organization. We used to work with 4 groups every year, 15 each group. It was very kind donors, personal donors. They used to give us money, and that's it. When we took the fund from the USAID asked us to grow the organization. Instead of working with, let's say, 60 kids, they asked us to work with 180 kids. We grew in a way very fast. If you see the scale, it's like, it went like this. It was crazy. And we had to follow their, let's say, their requirements, and we had to work depending on what do they want. They asked us to divide the groups to South and North. South Jerusalem, North Jerusalem. They asked us to put in each group 30 kids, where we literally had to recruit 180 kids each year. And at some point, you can't recruit all of this big number. It's very big. We recruited it, but to be honest, I'll be very honest, we didn't follow all of the requirements. They wanted us to recruit, let's say, 50 Israelis, 50 Palestinians. We couldn't. So in order for us to submit the list, depending on the requirement, at 180, we had to accept everyone. Even if at the end of the year I had 70 Palestinians and 30 Israelis, we didn't care. For 2 years, we were in a place where we got the fund, and we have to follow a very strict requirements, and it was crazy for the organization. And when the cut happened, we looked around. Even if the personal donors, they didn't stop giving us money, even with their money and other 10 people like them, we can't stand up. We can't stand up because of this huge number the US aid forced us to work on. So we decided, I'm not telling you, we won't apply for another US aid fund. That's not my decision, to be honest. But at the same time, we found ourselves in a place, they put us in a place that's way bigger than us. We found, we're following their requirements without thinking about us. It was really hard. That's from the USAID part. The Israelis and Palestinian governments, for Palestinians, for the majority of Palestinians, what we're doing is normalization. As simple as it is. You're bringing Israelis and Palestinians to one table. That's not acceptable. For the Israeli government, they don't use the word normalization. I don't know what do they use, but definitely they are totally. Kids for Peace is not something, as Ittay said. They don't send many parents. They won't send their kids to our organization. For them, we're something rare. We're a very big. We have a very big number of people. We have a great connections with the parents. We have a big community, but at the same time, we're like not the minority. Something like smaller than the minority in Jerusalem, unfortunately. Yeah. And if we got the ability, let's say, to apply for a grant from the Israeli government or the Palestinian government, I'll say no. I won't take it because I won't follow anyone's requirements. To follow a USAID requirement because they're giving us money, I'll think about it more than the Palestinian and the Israeli. Because the Israeli and the Palestinians, they wouldn't give it to us only as money. They will interfere in our educational programs, and that's not okay for us.
Yeah, I mean, governments tend to support programs that do advocacy for their government's view. That's why any program I'm not just talking about a peace organization, that's how governments operate, and it's obviously their right to do so, but if you did, then there would be an expectation that the kids in the program would be advocating for Israel or Palestine to each other or externally to groups they would speak to. And I personally, I don't want the kids to be pro-Israel or pro-Palestine. I want them to be pro-equality, pro-justice, pro-peace, pro-coexistence, those sorts of things that, again, I'm not saying there aren't people in the Israeli government that believe that. There clearly are, but they're not the majority at the moment, and so that's why taking that government funding would be difficult. But in terms of sort of like important people that have come, before COVID, we had a guest speaker, Nikolai Mladenov. Nikolai was the UN Special Coordinator for Middle East Peace. So he's appointed by the UN Security Council to come to the Middle East to make peace. Like, that's literally his job. And it's like probably one of the hardest jobs in the world to be accountable to the UN. And every time something goes on, like, he has to bring together Hamas and the Israeli government and Fatah, and he has to negotiate border crossings and water and transfer and money and all of these sorts of things. And he spoke to us about his job and how difficult it was, and the failures and the tensions of doing what he does about representing the UN. But he also said that, every time he goes to the Security Council, I think every 3 or 4 months, he has to give an update on the progress of Middle East peace, which is a very depressing thing to have to do. And he said, I'm going to speak about Kids for Peace. I'm going to tell the Security Council that there are these grassroots organisations that are not connected to any government, and they're trying to do something different. And it's important for the world to know that that exists as well, that that's also part of the story. And I think, like, for me, and maybe this is just my view, you can't have peace without the people. When Oslo was signed in 1993, why was it signed in Oslo? What's Oslo got to do with us? You know, it's like Oslo is the furthest corner in the world where it snows, and you know, it was done in secret because the Israelis, they couldn't meet with each other because they thought the other one was a terrorist. And I don't know if you've seen the documentary called Oslo on HBO. It's an incredible show to watch. These four men that initially won't even shake hands with each other, how they come to sort of build trust with one another. But when Rabin, Arafat and Clinton came out to the White House lawn, the people knew about it, I don't know, a week or two before. It wasn't like there were years of negotiations that everyone knew. It was a shock to everyone. It was a shock to even to people in the government. So of course it blew up in everyone's faces because you didn't have a constituency that supported it. Where was the peace education in the schools? Where was, you know, learning the other person's narrative in your education? Where was highlighting values of compromise? Compromise is not a popular thing in the Middle East. That was all missing. So you need grassroots for politics to work, but it also goes the other way. You could tomorrow have amazing leaders that want to make a change, but if you don't have the grassroots following them, and the grassroots say, "Oh, you're weak, you're compromised, you're talking to the other side, you're not upholding our values because you gave up on this or that little tiny thing," then that's also a problem. So peace requires both grassroots and politics, and when they don't work together, then the other's job becomes very difficult. So when you tell kids work in a peace organization, have hope, and they look at politics and it's like the opposite of hope, then that destroys the peace organization. And at the same time, if a politician comes and starts talking about compromise and, you know, ending the occupation and changing the status quo so everyone's equally, and the people are not with him, then the politicians are going to say, well, I'm not going to advocate those sorts of policies because the people want something else. So it has to go hand in hand or the change won't happen. Yes.
One last question because we need to wrap up and you still have another answer to give.
Sure.
So
Okay.
please.
Hi, thanks for sharing your experiences. But my question is, do you feel like there's a difference in the reasons that Israeli or Palestinian families send their kids to your program? I know that I've had conversations with people where it seems like Israelis are coming in with really believing in the message of peace, and Palestinians might be coming in because it's the best educational option for them, or it's the best option available for them as a program. So I was wondering if you've experienced that at all.
You answered the question. You asked the question and you answered it. That's exactly. Yes, sure. We feel it. We can't say it's for all Israelis or for all Palestinians, but for many Palestinians, they send their kids to practice their English. Palestinians and Israelis, they send their kids to travel to the States, as we used to send all the kids to the United States, different camps. For Israelis, they have many programs, after school programs. They have scouts, they have basketball, they have football, they have many things. So when they come to Kids4Peace, they really want Kids4Peace. For many Palestinians, I'll be honest, it's not because they don't have any other options. They have options, less than the Israelis, but they have options. As I said, they come either their parents want them to practice their English, or it's an opportunity to learn. Parents spoke with me about it, and we want them to leave their phones. We're so happy. We want them to be in a room around people to speak. As simple as it is.
I'd also say that as a Jewish Israeli, I can live my entire life and my entire day not knowing a word of Arabic, knowing nothing about East Jerusalem. My life will be fine. As a Palestinian, I can't live in Jerusalem without knowing some Hebrew or even fluent Hebrew. I can't really work. I have to understand Jews and Israelis to live in Jerusalem, because that's the majority, that's the government, that's the authorities, all the forms are in Hebrew, all of those sorts of things. So I think for West Jerusalem, in a way, Kids4Peace is like a luxury. It's like a nice thing to have, to learn Arabic, to meet Palestinians, but for Palestinians, and sometimes these parents say, my kids have to know you, because we can't ignore you in the way that you can ignore us, if you want to put it that way. And so that's one different motivation. Obviously the issue about traveling is a different motivation as well. Some kids come and they really want to talk politics, and some kids come and want to have nothing to do with politics as well. And so often the Jews that want to talk politics and the Palestinians that don't want to talk politics. So that's very common both in the Mulshidin and in the kids as well. And so you've got to be aware of that and to balance the fact that people are coming for various reasons. And again, I'm okay with that. That's the nature of the organization.
The thing this apply mostly on 6th grade. After 6th grade, if they really understood what we're doing, they enjoyed it, they'll come back as 7th grade. So usually we start 6th grade with 40 kids, and in the second year there'll be less, either because they are busy or because they didn't they didn't like it, or they didn't find what they are looking for. So mostly the kids, they continue with us to 7th, 8th and 9th grade, even 10th grade. They really know what they are doing now. Now we tried it for a year, we know exactly what's going on, and we're there because we believe in what we're doing. It's not only about language or traveling or whatever.
I just want to correct you, Ittay, with one thing.
Yeah.
Actually, the 3 most common words in Hebrew are in Arabic, which are wala, yalla, and sababa. So technically, every Israeli can have a full conversation just around those 3 words.
Mumtaz. Tada.
But we had one question that was unanswered. If you want to touch it, or you still haven't figured out the last part of
the aha moments.
Yeah.
There's a lot. There's no story coming to my mind at the moment, but I mean, sometimes it's like a fact or something that you learn. Like I mentioned about citizenship before. But I think often the aha moment is just the general experience, the fact that I did it. Often when people say to me, which I get often because I speak to groups all the time, Kids4Peace won't bring peace, and I say, you're right. Like, we're not going to bring justice to everyone in Jerusalem and stop house demolitions and terrorism and violence. Like, we're not going to do that. We're not politicians. But what we're doing is we're role modeling for kids. If there was peace, what would it look like? So what happens is every week they get 2 hours of peace, and they get to come into a room where everything is in Hebrew and Arabic, where all the staff want to make sure that no kid is treated differently, where the food is kosher and halal, where you can pray to Allah, you can pray to Jesus, you can pray to Hashem, where on camps there'll be multiple prayer options, food options, blessings, all of those things. We're giving them a taste of what peace looks like, and that is so powerful for a child to have, to say, I experience every week 2 hours of peace, or a summer camp of 5 days of peace, and it makes you think that that's possible, and that's what we're giving the kids. What they do with that is up to them. Do they change the world with that, or do they just have nice memories and photos? It's up to them. I can't change that. Within Kids4Peace, there's a gather program that really works with alumni to try and take those experiences and then turn them into social action, and I think that's great, and I hope our kids will join programs like that. But ultimately, we really giving them, in a way, just a taste of a different reality, and I think that's a real gift every time we can do that. Yeah.
One last question.
Yeah.
So before the point of normalization was brought up, and I'm curious first of all, how do you deal with the accusations that you are trying to normalize an unjust situation? And beyond that, how, if at all, do you maybe deal with the power dynamics at play? Because of course, these are all children, so everyone is equal as they are. But it's also true that one day, half the kids are going to grow up and go to the army and have play this certain role that ultimately they were born into and didn't choose. And then same for Palestinian kids, they're going to grow up also, and they're going to be the ones going through checkpoints, having guns pointed at them, etc. And of course, you're not going to stay a child forever. So curious how you manage that.
That's for you, Suma.
First of all, thank God, us as Kids for Peace, we've never experienced, let's say, people speak about us as normalization. They speak with us about normalization, what we're doing, we explain. But we've never experienced something, people coming to our meetings and start speaking with the kids and what we're doing, you're doing is normalization or something. I believe it depends on the situation in Jerusalem. Jerusalem is very small, first of all. So all of the people, they know each other. The situation in Jerusalem, it depends a lot on reputation, to be honest. So as a Palestinian, I'm a well-known Palestinian. People, they know, I work with, let's say, Israel, people from the other side, but at the same time, they know what do I believe in. So that's how they interact. They know Ittay. So thank God, as I said, we've never experienced anything with the kids as normalization, like criticizing them or attacking them or something. They sit, they come, and they speak with us. So that's about normalization. But for the people, yes, I'm telling you, go to any, let's say, Palestinian organization or whatever, they'll say Kids for Peace is a seeds of peace, Kids for Peace. Anything with peace, that's normalization. What's making it easier on us than other organizations, that our mission it's, or how Kids for Peace is registered, it's an interfaith organization. And for Muslims, we have to respect Judaism and Christianity. Judaism, there are the three religions. So three of us, we respect each other. So that's making it, for us, a little bit, let's say, harsh.
Yeah,
a little harsh.
I'd say on the Israeli side, the word normalization is not a word that's used, definitely not in a negative sense. But you will get the word traitor, boged, that if you are meeting or advocating for a Palestinian, you're betraying your side, your country, the purpose of Zionism, that sort of thing. So that's more of the word that would be used to sort of delegitimize Kids for Peace. In regard to normalization, the reason I think it's not normalization is because we don't believe the situation is normal, and normalization to me is upholding the status quo. And there's lots of organizations that uphold the status quo, and that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to do the opposite of it. We very much want to change the status quo, not through politics though, because we are not a political organization. And again, there's a huge role for politics, and I said that in an answer before, and I believe that you should be active in politics and vote and lobby and all of those sorts of things, but we specifically are challenging normalization through encounter, through dialogue, through encouraging social action, through telling stories, through just existing in the first place. I think we're challenging a certain status quo. Now, I think the people who are against us, they're saying your change is not happening fast enough. We want that change to happen tomorrow. And I understand that. I understand that as a parent in Jerusalem as well. And I say, if you want peace in 20 years, start working now. Because if you don't work now, you won't have peace in 20 years. And that's how peace works. It's very slow. There's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. That's the nature of peace. But if you want anything to be different in 20 years and you're doing nothing now, then 20 years will look like it does now. And so, and because a lot of people don't think long term, then they don't get what we're doing. But if you do think long term, you understand that it's far more powerful and radical than, in fact, many things that happen in politics.
Yes, and I think you expressed it well. I mean, in order to break the walls between the people, you need people to know each other. And I'm really sorry that we are closing, this conversation, because we have a lot more to talk about. But I really want to thank you, Suma and Ittay, for educating us, and good luck on your mission with Kids for Peace. I want to thank you, the audience, the community members who showed up today in person, and to the people who are watching us remotely. And I would like to thank the staff of Bnei Jashurun who made this event happen. You can continue following up with the other events that we're having on our social media, on our website. We have a great calendar with a lot of great events. And of course, I'm looking forward to seeing you in our next, hopefully in-person event, but definitely on other Zoom events.
Thank you. And just before we go, yes, thank you. Just for anyone that wants to be in touch with us, our website is K4PJerusalem.org, or on Instagram at K4P Jerusalem. And yeah, we'd love to be in touch with you. We also welcome groups to Jerusalem where you can experience Jerusalem through our eyes. So hopefully when you are able to travel again, we'd love to welcome you with your schools, congregations, communities, to hear and to meet our kids as well, and to support us in any way possible. So thank you again for your time and effort.
Thank you. Thank you.